I forgot to unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're all doing well. This has been a great conference so far. I've heard from so many good sessions here, and I can see that we already have a comment in the chat. So just to let you know, Penny is my co-presenter here, and she's going to be monitoring the chat. She's also going to be monitoring the Q&A. And we're going to go ahead and get started, but I'm going to stop my video first to conserve some of my resources here. Okay. All right, so my name is Bethany. I'm the Quality Matters Director of Research and Innovation, and I'm here with my co-presenter, Penny. Penny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Penny Ralston-Berg. I'm a Senior Instructional Designer with Penn State World Campus. I'm also Penn State's QM Coordinator, and I'm the current chair of the QM Instructional Designers Association, and a brand new research colleague, which I'm very excited about, and other QM things that wouldn't fit on the screen, so we'll just stop there.
Penny definitely wears all of the QM hats. Also, if you want to take a moment here to note the hashtag for our conference today, hashtag QM West Regional, please do feel free to tweet out any tips or strategies that you hear that you think are a great idea. I've also listed here the accounts for Quality Matters, as well as myself and Penny. All right, and you might hear my cat in the background if you heard that meow a little bit. But as always, we're going to start out with our learning objectives today. So here's a brief agenda of what we're going to discuss. We'll begin with some definitions, so we're all starting from the same place, and then move into some options for remote instruction. We'll then talk about how to prioritize and organize your remote teaching into phases based on where your institution is or where the situation is at the time. And along the way, we'll include lots of tips and strategies for engaging your remote students, including options for doing some rethinking of your design on the fly based on what has now become an ever-changing and uncertain timeline for sure. Okay, so what is remote learning? Here are some basic definitions of remote learning in academic continuity. One important thing to keep in mind, though, is that today's climate is a very different type of remote learning. So if it had been something that you've heard of in the past, this still is a very different situation. These are face-to-face courses that truthfully were never designed to be taught at a distance. And another important difference is that faculty and students were given a very short amount of time to migrate their face-to-face course to remote learning format. So those of you that have been in online learning for a while, you know that ideally we have a lot more time than a week or two to transition to a different type of online environment. So another thing that's important to remember is that right now, all of us are in this place where we're responding to an emergency need. And our focus for our remote learning courses is really this minimum viable option to meet the needs of our learners. However, along with this theme again of now and later, it's important to keep in mind that remote learning, as most of us are seeing it practiced now, is truly not a viable long-term solution. So moving forward, after we've all had a chance to breathe and decompress and regroup, it is important, though, to think strategically about offering quality education online, accompanied by a plan and a process for continuous quality improvement. So how does remote learning differ from online learning? First, this is an emergency response, as I mentioned, to an unplanned event. So moving face-to-face courses in a very short time to a remote format does not allow enough space and time to rethink our design and our teaching strategies for this new modality. Secondly, these courses were not designed for the online classroom. So those of you who are experienced online instructors or instructional designers know that ideally you're developing your online course a full semester in advance, and you're reflecting those design standards for the online environment. Also, the current situation is likely a disruption of your typical institutional support model. So most institutions are not used to supporting all of their courses in a remote format. And you may have limited resources or support for things like instructional design or LMS training. Additionally, we know that faculty who are asked to move to remote teaching had various levels of preparation and skills to make that fast pivot. Many faculty have never taught online or had faculty development in online design or teaching. And finally, student readiness is an even larger issue. We know that our students are finding themselves in a remote learning situation and they didn't sign up for an online class. This may be their first time using the LMS. Additionally, they may not have the necessary technology or internet connection that's needed for taking an online class. And we can't forget that our students, just like us, are dealing with changes in their living situation. They may have lost their employment, and they may be experiencing various levels of stress and anxiety that really do impact their motivation, self-efficacy, and learning. So what are our basic options for remote instruction? Very similar to our basic options for online learning, we can maintain academic continuity in a synchronous format, an asynchronous format, or a combination of those, including using the flipped pedagogical approach to model a new hybrid that I'm going to call remote flipped or flipped remote. So where students engage with content asynchronously and then engage in discussion and application during scheduled synchronous class meetings. So go ahead and take a minute and type in the chat, what type of remote instruction are all of you doing right now? Mostly synchronous, mostly asynchronous, or is anybody trying a combination? Both, all of the above, mixed both?
Combination.
Okay, so a lot of you are already doing that combination format. Okay. Awesome. Now, those options that we have, though, may be impacted by a number of factors. And a lot of those here are listed here on the screen. So institutions had various levels of preparedness and resources for this massive online pivot, including instructional design help or what LMS the institution had, or if an LMS shell was already created for all courses. So that may impact how you're moving to remote instruction. Your class size is also an impacting factor. If you're teaching a large enrollment remote course, you may be more limited in your options for engagement and interacting with your students, or even in possible assessments. Regarding technology skills, the skill levels of both faculty and students can impact the decision, as well as the availability of certain technologies, such as web conferencing software. Faculty and student readiness, as we've mentioned before, is a big consideration right now. So consider, what tech tools are you comfortable using? A lot of times when we're thrown into these uncertain situations, the best advice is to not try every new tech tool out there, even if everybody's excited about it, and start early, start in low tech ways that you're comfortable with, because you can always add things on later. And same for our students. They were not prepared to be remote students. So if they already were taking online classes, that's one thing. But for students that are brand new to this, you may not want to throw all the bells and whistles at them either. For the type of situation and the learner, and who we're teaching to, your choices would be impacted there as well, whether you're teaching a freshman class or you're teaching a small graduate class, or even whether the majority of your students are parents who right now have young ones at home and they're really wrestling with balancing some of these competing priorities. In terms of accreditation or financial aid requirements, there may be limitations or restrictions placed on available options by accrediting bodies or financial aid. So for example, your state aid may be directly tied to students attending a face-to-face course on a certain day and time. So 100% asynchronous learning might not be an option for you. So which of these things has been a barrier for you, or which do you think might be a barrier for all of you moving forward? Go ahead and type in the chat some of the things that you considered when you moved to remote teaching, or some of the things that you're considering in hindsight. So student readiness, absolutely. Internet access for students, faculty that are not ready for online teaching, what tech support do we have at our institution? Alternatives for high stakes assignments. You got it, Karen. We are going to be addressing that a little bit later. Okay. So in terms of prioritizing the transition, we're going to talk about strategies today organized by these prioritized phases. So these phases follow the format and examples of QM's emergency remote instruction checklist, which QM developed and released to support both the higher ed and the K-12 community during this time. Penny's going to provide a link to the emergency remote instruction checklist in the chat so that if you haven't had a chance to check them out, you can do so and click that link and then download them and save them for later. Okay, so in step one, first, it's really important to set our students and ourselves up for success by communicating any changes to course policies or structure, by setting and explaining expectations for students, and also to be sure to provide students with information about where to go for help with technology or tutoring and other types of support resources. So when moving to remote teaching, you may adjust assignments, including due dates, in order to provide for the complex and confusing situation that most of our students are in. So communicate any changes to the course schedule, but also remember to add due times for assignments. That's something that we often forget about when we move to online or remote instruction. And be sure to state the time zone, because many of your students might currently be residing in states that have a different time zone than where your institution is. Next, make sure that students know how to get started and even post in an announcement or send via email their first 3 to-dos. You might even continue to do this in the coming weeks as a way to orient students to each new learning unit. Also, tell students how to submit assignments, as this may be the first time that they're using the LMS. If you feel comfortable, you might even record a short screencast that shows students how to submit assignments and how to find their grades, which is the next important item to tackle right off the bat. If you have time, ask your campus resource office to show you how to view your course in student mode so that you can really understand what your students see. In some LMSs, for example, students don't know they have feedback unless they know to click that little talk bubble in gradebook. So little tips and tricks like that are important. If this is your first time, teaching online, definitely check in with your experienced online colleagues or with whatever DL office is appropriate at your institution. Finally, if you have any guidance or online interaction rules for synchronous sessions, such as not sharing the link publicly or using only academically appropriate backgrounds, whether students should check in the chat when they arrive, or how they should ask questions or participate during the session. Anything such as that really helps to orient students and make them feel more comfortable for how they participate in class. So there's plenty of ways to communicate with students during remote teaching. Here's some basic options. You can use the announcement tool in the LMS, which is a great way to motivate students for a new week or when beginning a new learning unit, or to post reminders for homework. Especially for students who may not be logging in or participating actively, you may want to email them individually to check in and see if they're having technology issues or other issues that might be affecting their participation. Also, make great use of your office hours by focusing on big questions that students have, or by talking through an upcoming big assignment or final project. So for example, if you have taught this course for years, you know what questions students have, even if they don't come out and ask them. You know the typical mistakes that they make on assignments, and those are things that you can address during your office hours proactively. Finally, if you're comfortable using your LMS blog tool, you could keep an instructor blog where you might post related information or articles on course topics for students who want to do a deeper dive, or you could connect course topics and learning to popular media articles to provide examples to students for how what they're learning is relevant to their current lives or their future lives. What are some ways that all of you have been connecting with remote students? How are you communicating with them primarily? Go ahead and take a second and type in the chat. Announcements and emails. Answer my discussions with a little video tied to a lecture. I love it. Mm-hmm. Good job, Chuck. Okay. Slack messaging. I'm hearing more that people are using Slack as a good.
WeChat for students in China.
WeChat for students in China. Personalized messages. I love it, Sandra. Okay, awesome. You guys are communicating in wonderful and creative ways. Okay, so moving along to setting expectations. So It's also important, first thing, to set clear expectations, including how students should contact you, whether it's via email or through the LMS. And if they ask a question, when can they expect a reply? Now, if you're receiving the volume of email that I am right now, you might even tell your students that if they don't receive a reply in the time frame that you have set, you might have missed it, and they may need to follow up or should feel free to follow up or attend office hours for help. But speaking of, think about being broad when providing options for office hours. You can hold them synchronously, but you can also tell students that they might email you during that time, and they can expect then to receive a speedy reply via email. Or you might even provide options for them to call you by using a Skype number or having your office number forwarded to your home or cell phone. Of course, you can do Zoom meetings or other types of web conferencing meetings. Speaking of turnaround time, though, definitely let students know how soon they'll receive grades and feedback after they turn in a given assignment. And know that this might vary for you based on the depth or complexity of the assignment. In general, though, make sure that students have your feedback in time for them to use it for improvement on the next assignment. And then finally, similar to considerations for attendance and participation during synchronous sessions, consider how students should communicate asynchronously. One thing you may want to do is just Google some basic netiquette policies for you to consider or edit or just adopt. So next, we're going to talk about really providing some ways for students to get help if they need it. And hopefully some of these items are already in your syllabus or in an institutionally maintained web page, but be sure to tell students especially how to contact technology help, including what they can help with. So if they have problems logging into the LMS, who helps with that? If they have problems, that are related to software, who helps with that? Things such as that. And then also provide information related to academic and student support options, that especially ones that students really may need at this time, such as tutoring options or how to connect with their library resources. Also, though, do think through some, options if technology goes awry or if students don't have the appropriate technology. For example, if students miss a synchronous session, can they watch the recording or things such as that? Have any of you thought about any workarounds for students that may not have an internet connection, for example, or let's say that something crashes or your web conferencing software goes down? Have you thought about any low tech or even no tech workarounds for yourselves and students in some of those situations? Or Penny, do you know of any tech workarounds we should keep in mind?
Yeah, recording is always a great idea. Just or some kind of transcript, or even if they're just notes. Also, sometimes you can have a discussion board paired with the office hours, and so that lets the conversation continue after the hours are over.
That's a great idea. Okay, a lot of other great ideas here in the chat. Rebecca, that's a fantastic idea, posting free hotspots around the campus. So for those who still may be near campus, especially, and maybe they need access to a hotspot, or if different places in the community, following up with social media. Okay, handwriting, photography, uploading assignments with cell phones. I love it. We have to get creative in situations like this. Wow, fantastic job, everyone. Okay, so now we're moving into the next phase where hopefully we've had those critical things attended to. We've had a chance to breathe just a little bit, and the next section of our focus really should be on connecting with our students more deeply and guiding their learning. So here we're going to talk about how to really elevate that social presence and get connected, get collaborating, ways to communicate alignment on the fly, and then also really focusing on feedback. Okay, so remember that connection is vital now. Social interaction builds trust and a sense of belonging. So here's a place where you can relax and have fun a little bit, while also knowing that you're actually providing important opportunities for your students to get comfortable and get connected. Some ideas here are asking students to share their home learning space or their home office, including their pets. So I finally got to use the cat icon in a presentation.
Right.
But this, it's great. You could have students, show you where they are. You could show them, what your home office space looks like. And you can even do this synchronously Or you could do it asynchronously by creating an open discussion board, for example, and having them share pictures.
Yeah,
Speaking of,
Charlie, making yourself a potato is always an option.
yes, as Chuck put in the chat there, make yourself a potato. Chuck actually taught me how to do that the other day, and we practiced, so I feel very accomplished now. But speaking of synchronous sessions, consider starting at least some of them by checking in on how students are doing. Including, learning related questions. So if they have any questions about the material that they're interacting with, or if they're having technology issues or any problems locating anything within the LMS, but also consider asking them how they're handling the stress of this difficult situation, right? So we are all in just, a very unique, unplanned emergency type of situation. And we know that stress is a factor here. So even letting your students know that you realize that they're under a high degree of stress as well, and that you want to make sure that they're okay and you're checking in, that can really go a long way to easing any of their concerns or fears. You might even do this by using a poll though, which you can incorporate in a synchronous session or even do asynchronously through an LMS survey or an integrated Google poll. And you could also consider helping students get set up in study groups or encouraging them to work together virtually on homework problems. But just in general right now, it's very important to give students opportunities to get together, but not in a graded way, so that they really do still feel part of the learning community that began face-to-face earlier this term.
We also have a suggestion in the chat that you could have multiple meeting times and students get to select the time that's best for them.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love the flexibility inherent in that. That's fantastic. And when we're talking about in-class interaction, there's really are a lot of really good ideas to translate that into the remote environment. So remember that synchronous meeting time doesn't need to be content delivery time. So getting back to that idea of flipped remote, students can interact with content in advance and then use the synchronous class time for discussion or other active learning options. If you're looking to do asynchronous discussions, I highly recommend you check out the fantastic presentation from this morning called Breaking the Humdrum of Post Once and Reply to Two Others for some great ideas on that. You might also consider reflective journals. They're a great option for interaction. It's one of my favorite LMS tools. And it might be especially useful during this time when our students are juggling multiple stressors that could impact their learning. So even, especially if you're a fan of like muddiest point papers or 1-minute papers in the classroom, which are great activities to check in with students, you can use the journal tool for that because it's private, it's meant for reflection, and it's really a great way to keep connected to your students and to continue to build that rapport with them as well. What are some other ways that you all are moving in-class interaction into your remote course? Go ahead and type some ideas in the chats or talk about things that you're already doing.
Susie mentioned a water cooler where the students
yeah,
ask each other questions not related to a specific activity.
That's a great idea.
Flipgrid.
Flipgrid, yes. I am beginning to learn to use Flipgrid, Sandra. Group logs, okay. Presentations and giving students a chance to take over sharing the screen there. Class cafe and discussion board. Yeah, I love those, not academically related discussion boards sometimes that really just connect us socially.
Padlet for pre-test review.
That's a great idea. Okay, a lot of great ideas there. All right, so moving on to communicating alignment and focusing on feedback. So if you're in the same place as me and you're losing track of days and times and you're thinking what's Zoom appropriate workwear at this point, you know that most of us are really hungry right now for familiar structure that can really anchor us. But you can easily model how you do this face-to-face by using text, audio, or even a short video to introduce each new learning unit, previewing the relevant objectives, and connecting new topics back to previous course assignments and content. It's also vital to make transparent the connections between what students are reading or watching and how they'll use their new knowledge on upcoming assignments. So consider creating a text document or even a short video to allow yourself the opportunity to thoroughly explain upcoming assignments, including what students should do, why they're doing it, meaning how it connects to the achievement of course objectives, how they'll be evaluated, and how they should submit their assignment. Don't forget to consider what file types you accept. You might also do this during office hours or during a synchronous session so students can ask questions. And definitely include any rubrics or assignment prompts that you already have. Finally, we've already mentioned the importance of timely feedback so that students can put it into use on their next assignment. But also remember that feedback is a two-way street. So ask your students for feedback on the structure or expectations of their new remote course, and then consider discussing this feedback with them. Even if you want to make changes as the remote course progresses, you may have some options for doing that. Students should always know, though, what they're doing and why they're doing it. And the why always ties back to alignment and your learning objectives. So are any of you currently asking your students for feedback? And are they providing any? Are there things that you know that they're struggling with? Okay, so Samantha, you're just looking for general feedback right now for how things are going. Okay. If it's not something that you've thought about, it's always a good idea, but it's especially vital right now. So within the LMS, you may have access to a survey tool that you could deliver anonymously and use that for feedback. You may also use, additional outside options, but anything especially that allows students to provide some feedback anonymously, because students may not want to admit that, they're having struggles with their internet connection, or they feel very disoriented online and they don't know where to start. So things that really give you the information that they need to help direct them. And a lot of these things you can discuss then during office hours. So Rebecca, you're saying every student's technology needs right up front. Yes, so maybe ask proactively, do you have technology concerns or considerations? And yes, absolutely, things about food security and other personal needs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rita mentioned don't get started early enough to get feedback in between.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so looking forward to longer term. So I think most of us really feel uncertain right now about what's going to happen in the coming months. How long are we going to be remote teaching? What is it going to look like even a few months from now? So adapting to online for the longer term. So here we're going to focus on, let's start to do some basic organization within the LMS. If you haven't had a chance to do that already, maybe you're starting to think about new material, and you're really also starting to think about engaging students and making sure that this is an active learning environment. Okay, so just focusing on organization here for a minute. Use an LMS template if your institution has one, and go ahead and pop in the chat if you do have an institutional LMS template that you were able to start with. You do want to leverage the LMS to organize materials into small packages of information and tasks, right? So a folder or module can list everything the student needs to read, watch, do, and submit for the week, and it just appears in one list. When the student reaches the end of the list, then they can be confident that they've completed all the work. Okay, and I'm looking to see how many of you were starting there with an LMS template. Okay, so for some of you, yes, others of you know, some of you had a super head start because it was based on Quality Matters or UDL principles. Okay, so JJ, your templates aren't required, but they are available for instructors that want them, correct?
I see a mention of a departmental template. We have that at Penn State, where we might have a template specific to a program. So some have them, some don't.
Ah, okay, yes. Okay. All right, so it looks like many of you have that. If you're not sure, or if this is the first time that you've heard that there's an option of an LMS template, definitely check in with the appropriate office at your institution and see if they have one, because often it gives you some good common navigation and organization to begin with. It also might link, for example, the tech help in the left-hand navigation and organizes that for you. And it really gives you a strong foothold there to start with. So definitely, as you're organizing the remaining weeks of the course into your folders, you want to divide don't organize it into learning units in weeks, but dividing the course into all lectures in one folder or all discussions in another folder or all quizzes in another folder really tends to confuse students, even if it's an easy way for us to organize. So for students, it kind of disperses that to-do list that we were talking about, and it makes it more difficult for them to manage. They're not sure, did they complete all the activities? And they're also clicking in and out of a lot of things rather than following this nice procedural learning path, right? So don't make it more difficult for your students to manage or to figure out whether or not they've completed the activities. Go ahead and organize things, into learning units. Okay. So many of you might be thinking now, hey, I want to add some material coming up, or you had things that you had planned for the face-to-face version of the course, and that material simply is not going to translate or can't be done online in the same way. So if you're teaching remotely for longer than you anticipated, or if you're comfortable now, you might be exploring these new options for course content. Consider first, what do students really need to be successful? So focus on those need to know items that are directly aligned to assignments, just to best focus students' time. I do want to share with you all that I'm hearing from a lot of faculty that either students are giving them this feedback, or I'm hearing from parents that their kids are giving them this feedback, or that they're actually doing a lot more work now that the course has moved to remote instruction, and they're spending hours and hours more than they ever would have spent face-to-face. So that's something to be aware of and to really consider. It's actually something that happens pretty frequently when anybody moves, from teaching face-to-face to teaching online, even though, we know that this is different than a truly online course. But a lot of times we think that if we stuff that course full of content, that we're doing our job, and that it's rigorous, and that students are getting everything that they need. But really, especially when you move to an online environment, when you move to remote teaching, you really want to focus on active learning and application, and you don't want to overstuff the course with content, okay? So focus on those need to know items, because you can always add content that's optional for students to explore for those who are interested, but you only want to focus on the content right now that's directly aligned to students doing well on their assignments. And you might explore the vast amount of open educational resources that are out there, such as Merlot or TED Ed Talks, PBS or Khan Academy. What are some of your favorite OER items? Because I know we have some attendees today who are pretty familiar with OER.
Well, they're typing that. We have some comments that more is not necessarily better, and it's
yes,
to overload students.
I'm applauding that comment, Rebecca. Yes. Okay, so Creative Commons is a good one. Yes. Yeah. Okay, OpenStax. Penny, do you have any go-tos for OER?
The ones listed here are
pretty much yours as well. Okay. Yes, yeah, even doing general searches on YouTube. Absolutely. Okay. Moving on to talking for a second here about short lectures or lessons. So you may now be thinking, or maybe you've already tried this, do you want to record some lectures for your online class? So you have your face-to-face lectures perhaps, and you're thinking, how might I do this online if I'm not doing this in a synchronous way? So you can absolutely do that. Remember though, to chunk them up and make them short. So general goal or general guideline there is 10 minutes or less. Short videos are best. They're best for technology. So they're best for bandwidth. They're best not only for technology bandwidth, but also our cognitive bandwidth for them. And if you chunk up your lectures into short, brain digestible chunks, and then even if you ask students to do something right after, like maybe lead to a short couple question quiz or something, that really starts to turn it into an active learning environment. So students aren't just passively receiving a lecture, right? So remember also alignment. What materials do students need in order to do well on assignments? You may find that they actually have all the information they need in their textbooks or other types of handouts or materials that they may have already gotten during the first part of the term. So you may want to refocus your time, and instead of focusing on lecture, you may instead be focusing more on feedback or connecting with students in other ways. So every piece of required content you share in your remote classroom should be directly tied to a relevant assessment, just like face-to-face. And then finally, one thing to consider is maybe having students help by doing a web scavenger hunt or having them find and post relevant articles or relevant blog posts on a given topic. Okay. Have any of you had any success with asking students to kind of share in some of the content creation here? Or any ideas for maybe doing that in the future when things settle down and you're a little bit more comfortable?
Rebecca has mentioned accepting video and audio submissions for assignments instead of just documents or quizzes.
I love it. Yes, options are great now. Guest lectures, that's fantastic. Live Q&A sessions via Zoom. Yes, so especially for those of you, who have colleagues in the field or in the discipline, this is a great time because you know that they're probably home too, to invite them into your online classroom. They could be a guest lecture or they could be there for Q&A. You could interview them live. Okay, I have my students create Adobe Spark. I love it. BuzzFeed quizzes, you guys are great. Ask for content related to what we're going through now. I've heard that from a lot of instructors, Rita. Yes. One instructor students do a video of themselves and submit an introduction discussions. That's great. Okay. Fantastic ideas y'all are sharing. Okay. And then finally, really bringing it home with, again, that focus on active applied learning. So we've provided a lot of ideas here for formative options, but consider a good mix of high stakes and low stakes activities. Some of the ones that we have listed here, those first ones are particularly applicable if you're thinking about doing some online asynchronous discussions. You may make some that are scenario or case study based, role playing or adopt a role. So my favorite example of that is I was helping design a course that was related to the health profession, and the discussions were all scenario based, and then students were assigned a role. So there was a scenario, for example, that was going on at a hospital, and one group of students were the hospital administrators, one group was the nurses, one group was the doctors, one group was the patients, one group was the insurance instructor, and they were all replying to the same situation, but from that perspective. And it really was important for the learning of that class because perspective taking was important as well, and understanding how different roles within the hospital system responded to the same crisis was very important. So really good creative things like that may seem initially out of the box, but they're very doable. We already talked a little bit about reflective journals. Blogs are a great idea because students can really participate from where they're at. A great example I have of that is when I was working with a horticulture professor, and for the particular type of plant species that they were talking about that week, she would have students go out into their own local communities and find a related species or something such as that, and then they would post it on the blog, and you would get to see things from all over the United States and in some cases the world, and look to see how in some cases people's backyard looks, for other students in the class. So another exciting thing to do there. Interviews we mentioned a little bit, especially expert interviews, but you may also think about considering that as an assignment type. So because people have some free time now, I've heard students may be asking them to interview a lawyer or interview their grandparents for something. Think about creative ways to also help students become connected outside of the class while still focusing on those course concepts. Group work may not be a great option right now unless you begin it during the first part of the term, because typically students need help acclimating to group work, including determining how they're going to meet and work collaboratively, all of which are more difficult during this time, right? So rethink that. If it's something that you had started, definitely something that you could consider with. For your summative assessments, consider providing options to students for how they might demonstrate their learning achievement, because choice can be a very appealing factor during times when we find ourselves in positions where we had no choice, like right now. So if you're rethinking your final exam, you may first consider whether that learning has already been assessed through another assignment, or you might consider some of the options that we posted here, especially with some of the restrictions and financial difficulties of offering proctored exams at this time. I'm also hearing a lot from both students and faculty that, students, already have a heightened level of stress and approaching final exams. mentally, it may not be the best option for some students. So you know your course and your students best, just some things to think about. But how many of you are rethinking your exams or rethinking some of those summative or culminating assessments that you have for your courses? Go ahead and type in the chat maybe how you're thinking through that or some options that you're considering.
There's also a question in the chat. How can we avoid impersonation problems in online assessment?
Well, it's one of the big questions, but in general, how I answer questions about online cheating are asking, well, how do you avoid impersonation problems in your face-to-face classroom?
Yeah.
So it's meaning that, these are issues that we deal with no matter the modality of our teaching or what type of classroom. I'm always a big fan of really focusing on authentic assessments, application types of activities where students, really can't plagiarize. It really has to be unique work and their own thoughts. It definitely is an issue. It's something maybe that instructors have to consider how big, of an issue or how they want to really approach it right now. Penny,
Yeah.
do you have any ideas or answers to that?
Some answers in the chat that say that no exams this term.
Okay.
And they're working on project-based, giving the students a choice of project-based versus traditional format exams in Canvas, giving them a choice. Yeah, in my work, I tend to be the same as you. I'm recommending more authentic kinds of assessment.
Mm-hmm.
If faculty are very concerned about that and don't have a proctoring option through their university, I've also heard of people using Zoom to do proctoring on their own with students.
Yes, I've heard that too. Okay, a lot of good ideas here in the chat.
Having students do a video of themselves answering a question, that's a great way to get them to show their work. Another option, if you're having them do a video of performing some task or skill, you can also ask them to think aloud while they're doing it. So you kind of get their thought process. What are you looking at? What are you thinking as you're doing the skill? If they talk out loud, you'll get a better idea of their understanding.
Absolutely. That's actually my top recommendation, Penny, when I get questions from, especially, for example, math professors, saying, well, how can I prevent cheating? Well, students can turn in their homework, but they can additionally turn in an audio file or a video file where they're talking through their thinking and their work behind working out the problem.
Talking through the process. That's good for different kinds of maybe allied health care, occupational therapy, physical therapy, anything that's based on performance. You can have them talk through the process while they're doing it.
And in truth, that's the information that you most want as faculty, because you don't want to know, did they get the right answer? You want to know how they got the answer that they got, so that you can either, correct their thinking or say, no, your thinking was correct there. Rebecca, you have a very good point. Many small assessments can lead to not needing a large summative assessment. So yes, the biggest first question is, have you already assessed it? If you have already assessed those things that you had intended to assess on the final exam, maybe you do not need the final exam this time. So definitely an important consideration. Time limitation, if you are, if you're having a multiple choice exam, absolutely.
And also with multiple choice exams, drawing the exam from a pool of questions. If you're giving the student 10 questions, you can have a pull from a pool of 30. So students get each student has different questions. You can also randomize. So if they say number 3 is B, my number 3 is not the same as your number 3.
Right.
So that helps too.
Oh, I love that, Rebecca. Trust your online students.
Trust your students.
Okay, so we are wrapping up here. Any questions though, because we do want to leave a couple moments really to just have a conversation with you, find out where everybody is right now, and maybe what are some of your biggest questions or obstacles. And these could be questions that you have, or questions even that you're getting from colleagues or that are bubbling up at your institution. Or maybe you have the best remote teaching tip ever and we didn't talk about it, but you would love to share it in the chat. We're also gonna, let me look at the Q&A board.
Yeah, there's a comment in the Q&A. I'm not sure that it's really a question, but I saved it just in case.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The biggest obstacle is putting face-to-face courses online that are poor quality, which will lead to retention issues. Yes, that's a big concern.
Yes, yes. Yes. And that comes back, Rebecca, to that idea that we began with, that now and later. Right now, we know that there are quality issues, but everybody is doing the very best they can, faculty, students, and institutions all included in that. When we have, more time and space to breathe and to rethink and to strategize. So, when I'm looking forward, to summer or especially to fall, definitely, if we're still in this situation, we need to start thinking more about better quality and offering that to our students.
There's a question, what about student privacy concerns when being videoed for proctoring?
What say you, Penny?
That probably varies by institution.
Yes.
We have been given statements to put in syllabi and to share with students, notifying them of what's being recorded and when. And so we're being very careful that they're notified that they're being recorded. I can turn my video back on too.
Hi, Penny. Any other questions from either folks in the chat or via the Q&A? We do have a couple minutes left. Oh, and also feel free to type in the chat whether or not this session was helpful to you, or some other things maybe that we didn't talk about or that you'd like to hear more about or do a deeper dive on in the future.
Yeah.
We love feedback, you know that. You're welcome,
Right.
Dolores, thank you. Okay, so Mark is saying our faculty want to lecture and don't understand that online teaching is different. Have I faced this problem? My entire career, Mark. But
yes.
what I am keeping in mind right now is that this is an interim situation. This is a temporary emergency response situation. And I do also know that faculty are just as displaced and unmoored as our students. So if what you're used to, if your comfort zone in teaching is that face-to-face lecture, you may just want to translate that into remote instruction and start with that. And that's also why we've kind of, prioritized this into phases, because immediately you go to what you go to what you're comfortable with. And if what you're comfortable with is that web conferencing type of synchronous lecture, okay. But that's why we also, provided some ideas and examples for later on. So maybe in a week or two, you're ready to maybe to consider some other options for that, because typically it's not the best online option, right? So part of it too is having some grace and understanding for ourselves, and really thinking, okay, what am I comfortable with now? What can I add on without getting overwhelmed? And just do it gradually, adding in additional things or options as you grow more comfortable.
Yeah, that's so important to remember that it's an iterative process. The remote learning was response to emergency, but what happens after remote learning, if they're not as familiar with fully online, well-developed online learning, right? It's okay to start small and then each semester enhance and improve, right? It's all about continuous improvement. So I think as designers especially, we meet people where they are and where they feel comfortable, and then remember that it's an iterative process and we'll be making improvement over time.
Yeah, I love it. For a second, Barbara, I got to see your cats.
Cat.
See, sharing photos of your pets. I love it. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
A local college is giving everyone pass-fail. Yeah, our college is doing the same. They have the option of grade or pass-fail or another option.
I think that's where most of us are individually and collectively. Lower the bar a little bit. We all need a break.
Right.
Oh, all New Mexico public schools are moving to pass-fail. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good, Brenda. I didn't know that she was collecting that as well. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's great. Oh,
That's
so
interesting.
yeah, I just want to, so the comment about appreciating the validation, right? We're all in a similar boat, right?
Yeah.
Challenges for one are challenges for all. So it's our community is how we can stay strong through this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing that Ireland is doing, Deb. So in the chat, she's saying that some colleges in Ireland are addressing cheating by simply asking students to attest that they are not. That's that's very interesting because I would imagine, from a psychological standpoint of stating, I'm not cheating. This is my own work. Students actually have to kind of sit in that for a minute. So that's something.
It at least
And
makes them
hopefully more
pause and think.
yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. Deb, you're putting it much better than I attempted to. So she's saying there's research that says if you ask people to attest to it before they do it, it's more powerful. Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, and check us. Yes. So just to let everybody know, if you do have questions that come along, or if colleagues have questions in the future, we do have QM Hire at office hours twice a week. So you can join me Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 Eastern time. Or if you're an instructional designer that just wants to hang out and chat a little bit and share some ideas and strategies or what's going on at your institution. We've also had little ID debriefs there and hangouts. So please do join us and stay connected. Okay. Yes. And Rachel, there are fantastic resources out there, in general. A lot of institutions individually are putting out some great resources and packets for remote teaching. Absolutely.
I also just put my Twitter handle into the chat. So if any questions come up after or have any questions about QM and the IDA.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Bethany and Penny. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this point. Looks like this is a break time now until 2:30 p.m. Pacific. But excellent presentation. I want to thank everyone for attending.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks
Thanks
to
a
our
lot.